Awesome. All right. So let us pick up where we left off last week. And so we're at the very bottom paragraph of page 161. And what we were reading, the story that led us up to bottom paragraph 161, was this idea of the growth of Alcoholics Anonymous as it started in Ohio. So the growth of it in Akron, and then it's spreading out to, Cleveland and the growth that happened and explaining what early AA looked like, what early 12-step work looked like. And at the very bottom, and man, I'm just going to kick us off with this again. So where we'll be actually starting off is 161 under only slightly different conditions. But I just love the line, being wrecked in the same vessel. And that vessel is my hopeless condition of a physical allergy, that once I start to drink or use, I can't control the amount that I take. But what really makes that hopeless vessel, that shipwreck of my life, is a mental obsession that compels me to go back to it again and again and again, despite the fact that I know it's destroying my life. And so we come here with the same problem, physical allergy, mental obsession. And it says, being restored and united under one God. That's our solution, is spiritual awakening. And if you're like, hey, what do you mean one? No, it's your own conception. Don't stress out too much about that. But there's a power that works here. And it says, with hearts and minds attuned to the welfare of others. And I love that. Like, that is what a spiritual awakening looks like. See, I come here and I'm so wrapped up in me, and all I can think about is me, and I can't see beyond myself. And that is not fun. You know what I mean? If you know what it's like to be wrapped up in the bondage of self, because I'm not sitting around thinking, boy, I am a delightful human being. I'm just a peach to be around. No, I'm thinking about how everything is awful and everything is agony, right? But now my heart and my mind is attuned to others. And that's the most sure sign of a spiritual awakening. And it says the things which matter so much to some people no longer signify much to them. How could they? The things that I thought were so important doesn't even matter. Like, I've rooted myself in something deeper. And so this is where we dive into, under only slightly different conditions, the same thing is taking place in many Eastern cities. So we're pointing to New York, and Bill Wilson's beginning to do, after he returned home, to go do 12-step work, and how that began to grow on the Eastern, I'll say Eastern seaboard. I feel like that's reasonably geographically accurate. If it is geographically incorrect, man, I will apologize profusely, because I love my geography, as some of you guys know. So I'm like, oh, let me look up where that is. Anywho. So under only slightly different conditions, the same thing is taking place in many Eastern cities. In one of these, there is a well-known hospital for the treatment of alcoholic and drug addiction. So this was the Towns Hospital in New York City. And for those that might not know, like, why the heck would we care about the Towns Hospital? Well, this is the hospital that Dr. Silkworth worked at. And Dr. Silkworth is he's the doctor that gave us knowledge of what our problem is, gave us knowledge of the physical allergy, gave us knowledge of the mental obsession. And he's the doctor that wrote essentially the chapter, The Doctor's Opinion. So it says 6 years ago. And by the way, if you care about geography, you don't have to. Feel free to disassociate for this little tangent if you want. The Towns Hospital, it was just right across, the building is still there. I believe it's like townhouses, but it was right across the street from Central Park. And Central Park for many years, especially after the First World War and in the Great Depression, had a lot of homelessness and a lot of people that struggled with alcoholism and drug addiction. Now, keep in mind, it was not a cheap hospital to get into. Lois was like, by the final time, Bill ended up, she was pissed he went. She's like, buddy, who's going to pay for this? I'm just working at Macy's. Well, it's not quite working at Macy's, but I was doing to, outsource for them, putting out displays. You know what I mean? I can't afford this bill. Anywho, tangent and returned. All right. 6 years ago, one of our number was a patient there. And who we're talking about is Bill Wilson. And again, Bill Wilson is the first alcoholic to have knowledge of the three pieces of vital information that I need to know in order to achieve sobriety. Bill Wilson knew what his problem was. He knew that from Dr. Silkworth. Dr. Silkworth explaining the physical allergy, the mental obsession. And he knew what the solution was. His old school friend, Ebby Thatcher, showed up after having been helped out by Roland Hazard, who long story long had worked with Carl Jung and got into contact with the Oxford group. And from there, he learned that little sequence of events. He learned our solution. Our solution is a spiritual awakening, spiritual experience. And he learned what later became our program of action, the 12 steps. So he learned the program of action to get from the hopelessness of his alcoholism to the hope that is the spiritual awakening. And it was a series of actions that the Oxford group had that later became our 12 steps. So 6 years ago, one of our number, Billy Dubs, my homie, was a patient there. And it says many of us have felt for the first time the capital P presence and capital P power of God within its walls. I love whenever we see capitalizations, not universally, but more often than not, when we see words that are capitalized, what are we pointing to? We're pointing to words that mean God, synonyms for God. And I love that it is capital P power, and we saw power all over the chapter, We Agnostics. Capital P power. And that's what I need. Not just power. I'm big on, I don't need power. I need a relationship with power. That's what I'm big on. But presence and power. Capital P presence. And I love the idea that the God, higher power, creator, spirit of the universe, power that is available, that is on offer, is a present tense verb, is a power that's not an over there idea, not a looking in the rear view mirror conception, not something that is a distant sort of Santa Claus. Although if that's where you're starting, that's more than okay. But what we're talking about is presence, something that is here and now, something that is felt, and verb, moving, action, not a stationary idea. Man, man, if you are new and if you're like struggling with the conception and you're like, gosh, what is she on? Presence and power. Woo, that's what I'm on. It used to be alcohol and crack cocaine, but presence and power. Like that, you don't have to fully understand that. You don't have to believe that. But man, that's what I'm after. Actually, we're tying in my little tangent. I wasn't after the idea of alcohol. I wasn't after the idea of crack. I wasn't after the idea of the pills that I couldn't stop taking. You know what I was after? I was after the experience. You know what I'm saying? You guys know I was after the, I wasn't sitting around in lectures as people were explaining, the enzyme of alcohol and here's what it does. No, I was pissing my pants behind a dumpster because I'm a lady. That's what I do. I was after the experience. And for me, it is like that with God. I'm not after an idea. I'm after an experience. I need an experience. I also have this whole other talk where I compare the spiritual journey through the 12 steps to Tinder. So if you're here for inappropriate spiritual metaphors, I got you. I don't know if Tinder still has super like, but you just have to swipe. I've not actually been on Tinder, but I heard it had super like. You don't even have to super like God. You don't have to pay for the premium account. You know what I mean? We just got to take some action. I don't know. So it says, we are greatly indebted to the doctor. Now, this is our guy, Silky, our Dr. Silkworth. I call him that. He probably would not have appreciated if I did, but I like to think we'd be friends. Now, keep in mind, I've been known to have delusions. Just alcoholic ones, though. Nothing special. So the doctor in attendance there. For he, although it might prejudice his own work, has told us of his belief in ours. So he's a doctor that is working in a hospital that was solely focused on alcoholism and drug addiction. And he's saying, hey, these drunks that are helping each other for free, yeah, they're doing something that works. That's what he's saying. He had so much faith and belief. And, by the time we get into the 12 traditions And we see that Charles Towns, the owner of the Towns Hospital, was like, Bill, I'm gonna get you a job here. You can work here as a lay therapist. You know, they were not doing well. They could have used the money like that. They were trying to get Bill in because they knew that there was something working. And for Dr. Silkworth, in a time where the hospital wasn't making money or as much money as it used to in the 1920s, to be like, I really believe in what these, he didn't call them silly little drunks, but I really believe in what these silly little drunks are doing for free. You know, that tells us that there's something here, you know? Every few days, this doctor suggests our approach to one of his patients. Understanding our work, he can do this with an eye to selecting those who are willing and able to recover on a spiritual basis. Keep in mind the willingness. I joke about this because it's my personality is I'm like, it's consensual. Nobody's going to make you do it. It's a big book study. It's consensual. Please, enthusiastic consent. Please, if you want to, I'm not going to make you. You know what I mean? But nobody's going to make you. It's the willingness, right? Those who are willing. There's no point in me trying to make somebody do something they don't want to do. As somebody who has had to do Al-Anon, I've tried. Listen, I got issues. I had to do a lot of spiritual work. So, but I also want to point out, it says willing and able to recover. And that's what I'm after. Recover. That is the hope. And it says on a spiritual basis. And I always want to emphasize basis is basis of life, way of life. But also as we talk about recovering on a spiritual basis. Sometimes when you go to meetings, you might hear something like, yeah, I'm not a big fan of the spiritual part of the program. And I have not yet asked, because there was not an appropriate point, and it might come across and be a little passive aggressive. What is the non-spiritual part of the program? Because this whole thing is about a series of actions to produce a spiritual awakening. All of it is spiritual in nature. So it is a spiritual way of life. That's what we're talking about. So it says many of us, former patients, go there to help. Going back to try to carry this message, to work with those who are struggling. Again, the 12th step is about I make the approach. I go and help others. And it says, then in this eastern city, New York, that's not the accent, New York City, I'm walking here. I'm going to get so many letters. Okay. And then in this eastern city, it is New York. So it says, then in this eastern city, there are informal meetings, such as we have described to you, where you may now see scores of members. There are the same fast friendships. Scores, multiples of 20. I didn't know that, because I know isn't fourscore, anywho, so that was 2 weeks. Isn't fourscore 2 weeks? Got a little, no, it's not. I'm wrong. Okay, frequently wrong. I could be wrong. Everyone's just telling me I'm bad at math. I used to be a math tutor. 80. Fourscore. Oh, that makes sense. Because 4 times 20 is 80. We got there. If you're wondering, all of the other big book studies at Big Book Compendium, they don't have a little math break where it takes a group effort to get there, So just keep that in mind. Thank you. Fortnite. Yeah. Focus page. So it says, there you see the same fast friendships. And there is some, you go to a meeting out of town or you show up to a Zoom meeting, you've not been there before, and there's a quick, almost an instant connection. And it says there's the same helpfulness. And I got to thank you all for your helpfulness with the math. Thank you. Team effort. There's the same helpfulness to one another as you find among our Western friends. The Western friends are Akron and Cleveland. Now, to be fair, Akron kind of ran things or did things a little bit differently. They're very involved in the Oxford group. And New York was involved, but less so. Cleveland was its own sort of shenanigans, because they were really the first to be like, we're not going to be involved in the Oxford group. We're going to do our own thing. And you can kind of see some of the differences if you go to some of these places or meetings in some of these places, the differences. And despite there being differences, people were still getting well. And it says there is a good bit of travel between East and West, and we see a great increase in this helpful interchange. And there were times, I will point out, sometimes the travel between groups was like not always like friendly. Sometimes it was like, what are you doing? You can't leave. You can't start your own meeting, you know? But it's all like when I kind of joke about some of the rocky early beginnings and some of the discourse that happened in early AA, I point it out because that is where we grew from. Sometimes I think if it's spiritual, it's got to be smooth the whole way. And it's important to remember that so many of our co-founders weren't saints. They were drunks just like us. And I do want to strive towards that spiritual ideal, knowing that I'm never going to hit it. But yeah, it's okay to be human, and it's okay if there's a jerk at your home group who just makes the business meetings unbearable. That happens. Happened in Cleveland. I don't know. I'm joking about Clarence Snyder. Clarence Snyder. He's a really useful, like he was a difficult fellow, and God uses difficult fellows. So it says, someday we hope that every alcoholic who journeys will find a fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous at his destination. And some of you guys might be like, hey, this sounds a little familiar. Now, or you might be like, this sounds not familiar at all, Paige. What are you referencing? Forward to the second edition. This is quoted in the forward to the second edition. If you got a fourth edition book, it is on page XV. And this part of the book is quoted, is referenced. Yeah, some of you guys are like, yeah. And if you were with me from the very beginning, you might have that note that says page 162. It's at the very top of the page. And so that's the hope, that hope. And that's like my responsibility, that those who suffer, that there is going to be this fellowship. And that's where the traditions and the concepts for whatever fellowship you're a part of are so important. So it says to some extent this is already true. Some of us are salesmen and go about. Little clusters, 2s and 3s and 5s of us, have sprung up in other communities through contact with our 2 larger centers. And I want to point something out. Man, we get to zoom in from all over, literally all over the world, all over North America, all over Texas. We did the geography, like all over. And it's so easy, so convenient to just, show up and here we are. You know what I'm saying? But in those early days, I might be a lone alcoholic. And maybe at best, maybe I have a copy of this book. And I had to go out and create the fellowship. And how I created that fellowship was going and finding other people to work with to carry this message one to another. Man, all I got to do now, like bare minimum that I ask for my sponsees. I'm not going to tell other people what to do because they've not given me spiritual license consent. See, I'm all about consent. But if you're my sponsee, you got to do it. And like I could make anyone do anything. But it's like I make the approach. In 2024, I've been making this joke lately. Like we don't even have to wear pants. Keep the camera up if we're not wearing pants. But we don't even got to wear pants to show up and help somebody. So at minimum, I can get their number. You know what I mean? At minimum, I can reach out to them in chat and I can get their number and I can approach them. I'm not alone in Lexington, Virginia. I think there's also Lexington in Kentucky. By the way, why is that in my brain? I don't know. I'm as baffled as you are. Toledo, I could, or Calgary, where I'm actually from. Like I could be alone with a copy of this book and go the power of God, this book, go help others. 2024, man, we gotta zoom in. This thing's recorded. You can listen to it whatever, like it's so easy. So at minimum, I gotta reach out and help others. So reach out to them, make the approach to them. So those of us who travel drop in as often as we can. This practice enables us to lend a hand and at the same time avoid certain alluring distractions of the road, about which any traveling man can inform you. Thus we grow, and so can you. And this is sort of the thrust of what I was talking about, but this is a beautiful example. This book, Alcoholics Anonymous, is not expecting perfection. The book Alcoholics Anonymous meets me where I'm at, meets me in my doubt, meets me in my unwillingness, meets me in my fear, because that's usually what it is. Whenever I'm unwilling, what am I really afraid? Thus we grow, and so can you. And the book meeting us where we're at. Though you be but one man with this book in your hand, we believe and hope it contains all you will need to begin. And that's the purpose of this book, to give me everything that the hope is that it will give me everything that I need to begin what? The spiritual journey, this way of life, begin what? Working with others. That's what Vision for You is about. And it's begin. But also that's why we study it. That's why this is a big book study. We're studying it because it contains directions on how I, a hopeless alcoholic, crackhead, like wet pants, dumpster, you know what I mean? Like hopeless, to a place where that's not who I am today. You know what I mean? And deeper than that, like crack aside, wish I couldn't do that. Couldn't put that aside. That was tricky. But that aside, man, I was miserable. The bedevilments on page 52. I was wrapped up in that bondage of self. I hated myself. I hated my life. I didn't really hate people, but I wasn't jazzed about them. But I was pretty sure they hated me. You know what I'm saying? Like I could not show up to life. And I'm showing up in a way that I never thought possible. And what happened? I'm just doing the stuff that's in here. And that's why we're studying it. And man, it's hard not to be excited. Genuinely. It's hard not to be excited going through a book like this that is absolutely transformational, that is life-changing, that is like changed who I am at a fundamental level for the better, for the better. And there's no glass ceiling, there's no limit to what happens if I dive into this work. And that's truly, 163, top of the paragraph. That's really what this book is about. And it says, we know what you are thinking. So again, the book meeting me where I'm at. You're saying to yourself, I'm jittery and alone. See, the book isn't saying, hey, everyone be as jazzercise as Paige is right now. Again, I don't have to leave the house. I can just sit in bed and do this. It's easier. It's like you're jittery and alone. Yeah, they don't have Zoom to zoom around, meeting us where we're at, meeting us in the fear, meeting us in the doubt, meeting us in the uncertainty. I'm jittery and alone. I couldn't do that. And taking us where we need to go. The book always meets me where I'm at and takes me where I need to go. But you can. You forget that you have just now tapped a source of power much greater than yourself. You see, I'm not doing it. My job is to get me as much out of the way, I promise that's what you want, as possible. So a power that is not me gets to flow through me. That's what I'm trying to do. A power much greater than yourself. Now just tapped it. Man, my brain, because my brain's thinking about like tapping a keg. You wouldn't start once you just started by tapping. You know what I mean? You've been, let's get her dry, like this is a journey. I've just started. I've just begun. Now, the amount of inappropriate metaphors in this one today, who's keeping count? Alrighty, I think it's 3, but somebody will let me know what's 4. Alrighty, to duplicate with such backing. The backing of what? The backing of a power beyond myself, the spirit of the universe. What we have accomplished is only a matter of willingness, patience, and labor. For fellowship to grow up about me, what is required? Willingness. That same willingness we spoke about in step 6, the same willingness we spoke about in step 8, that same willingness that Bill Wilson was talking about that is needed to produce the spiritual awakening, willingness, and then patience. Because I'm gonna take the actions. But if I've lived this way of life, if I've gone out and make amends, if I've gone and worked with people, we know one thing for sure: the results are not in my hands. I am not in the results business. I can't, I wish I was, because I am codependent, but I'm not in the results business. So it will take willingness, patience, and labor. It's going to take work. This way of life takes work. Now, often in meetings, we talk about happy, joyous, and free. And that is true. We are sure God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. But here's my experience. For me, who is buckets of misery, misery galore, that is who I am on my own power, misery. To get to happy, joyous, and free, I need willingness, patience, and labor. I need the work of doing this as a way of life, like my life depends on it because it does, and working with others, carrying this message to others, letting go of the results. And it's interesting. The more I do this work, and I'm not saying perfectly, but the more effective I've become. It takes us practice. It's practice. I'm no good at sponsoring others. Just do it more. I can't meditate. We're talking about that all day on Thursday, all day. Got to do it. Can't pray, gotta do it. It's just doing it. And I do it, it'll happen. So it says, we know of an AA member who is living in a large community. Now, this is our Bill Ruddle debate. Is it Bill Ruddle? Is it Hank Parkhurst? Who could it be? So this is the Rob and Eileen, New Jersey anniversary, because it was like, who could this be? So it doesn't really matter. But it's possibly Bill Ruddle of Hackettstown, New Jersey. Or it is Hank Parkhurst, who was also in New Jersey. So it's Jersey, I hear they have a turnpike and everything. It's the Garden State, don't you know? So, they were like New York City, across the Hudson, got Jersey. That's where they were doing so is it Bill Ruddle? Is it Hank Parkhurst? And the reason it's, I'll point out why it's so funny. It's a mystery of who could it be in just a second. So we know of an AA member who is living in a large community, somewhere in Jersey, perhaps. He had lived, but maybe it's New York, but I'm pretty sure it's Jersey. But he had lived there but a few weeks when he found that the place probably contained more alcoholics per square mile than any city in the country. Ooh, which is exciting. Probably not if you're like really into like gardening, because we drunks, man, we just fall right into gardens. We just uproot our lives and uproot your turnips. My bad, guys. Your rose bush and everything. So this was only a few days ago at this writing, 1939. The authorities were much concerned. He got in touch with a prominent psychiatrist who had undertaken certain responsibilities for the mental health of the community. The doctor proved to be able and exceedingly anxious to adopt any workable method of handling this situation. So he inquired, what did our friend have on the ball? So the situation, man, there were so many people dying of alcoholism. Like it was such an issue. He's like, man, anything you got, I'd be willing to try. Our friend proceeded to tell him, and with such good effect, the doctor agreed to a test among his patients and certain other alcoholics from a clinic which he attends. Arrangements were also made with the chief psychiatrist, that's like the head psychiatrist of a large public hospital. And here's why this is like, it's like, ooh, who could it be, Hank or Bill? Because in the chapter 2 employers, Hank Parkhurst, he is the consummate salesman. He's a wheeling and dealing. He's the salesman guy. He couldn't get any of his business guys to like be open to this idea of like what alcoholism is, and to like let him help some of these alcoholics that they had in their company. They're like, no, I'm not interested, Mr. Salesman Hank. I'm not buying what you're selling. He was spending 2 hours with one guy who was a friend, and he's like, nah, this drunk that we're talking about, nuh-uh. If he drinks again, I'll fire him. I warned him if he drank again. So there's no way he's going to drink again. He drank again. We know. So if this is Hank Parkhurst, This is a Hank Parkhurst redemption arc. Here he is communicating with such good effect that somebody's like, yes, I will let you help, through this institution. But if it's Bill Ruddle, I mean, oh, poor Hank. You know what I'm saying? Poor Hank if it's our guy, Bill Ruddle. So part of me wants it to be Hank for the redemption arc because Hank and I, we go on tangents. But, and if it's Bill Ruddle, that's okay too. Thanks for helping out, whichever one it was. All right, so it says arrangements were also made with the chief psychiatrist of a large public hospital to select still others from the stream of misery which flows through that institution. And I want to take us on a little tangent to page 28. On page 28, it's in the chapter, There is a Solution. And what we're going to do is page 28, very first, or very second full paragraph right at the top of page 28, where it says, we in our turn sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proved to be the loving and powerful hand of God. A new life has been given us, or if you prefer, a design for living. Way of life. What we're talking about is a way of life that really works. And the reason that this is a beautiful tie-in for a silly little drunk like me is that I was in that stream of misery. That tide of alcoholism had me. If you're here for addiction, the tide of addiction had me. If you're here for whatever brings you to this study, man, that tide had me. And it was like a river at flood. You know what I mean? And I was being swept away. And I saw beyond a shadow of a doubt, I couldn't control the amount that I used, the amount that I drank. I couldn't control it anymore. My feet couldn't touch the bottom. You know what I'm saying? And I was grasping for anything and anything that I could use to get my head above water, to get me out of the river. I was drowning, and I would grab a hold, of this log, with self-will, I'd grab a hold of it, and it would just, bowl me over, and I would be, taken under the water. And I would grab a hold of like a branch and some debris, and it would sink along with me. And I would grab a hold of, and maybe that was my relationship or my geographic, and all these things that I would try, and there was nothing that was working that would allow me to have permanent contented sobriety. I couldn't do it. And I see this reed, and the reed was drunks like you that said a power greater than yourself had made a change in your life. These 12 steps have a spiritual awakening. And I'm like, man, that couldn't possibly help somebody like me. But out of desperation in that stream of misery, and there have been times I've grabbed a hold of that flimsy reed in misery and sobriety. You know what I mean? And there's a thing that happens. I do this work and I do it diligently and it works. But I get complacent. And you guys know, it's like, even though I'm not doing the work, we got life piling up. It's like, no, an inventory couldn't possibly help this. You don't understand. You know what I mean? I think the work doesn't work. But you see, every time I grab a hold of that flimsy reed in my hand, that reed transforms into the loving and powerful hand of God that pulls me to safety. I don't have to like the reed. I don't have to believe in the reed. I can feel like it's going to pull out of the river bank just like everything else. And it's not going to work. But if I grab a hold with everything that I got, transforms into the hand of God, I'm pulled out to safety. And then what do I got to do? I got to extend my hand to those that are also in that stream of misery. That's what I get to do. So I like that little tie-in. Stream of misery. Back to 163. So our fellow worker will soon have friends galore, which is a unit of measurement I need to use more often. Friends galore. Hey, friends. Galore, friends galore. Some of them may sink and perhaps never get up. But if our experience is a criterion, so if we can rely upon our experience, more than half of those approached, so we're seeing that number, will become fellows of Alcoholics Anonymous, that same 50% that we saw in the comparing the preface to the foreword to the second edition. Later on in the foreword to the second edition, we saw about a 75% success rate. And what were they approaching them with? Approaching them with this work, these actions to produce a spiritual awakening. That there is something here that works. And I talk about this, man, I've been doing this for a little while. Don't put an H in it, Paige. While, don't like, woo. I know, just annoying. But I have never seen anyone that was doing the deal, like full on doing the deal, working with others, had made their amends, all of them, praying every day, meditating every day, doing the evening review. I've never seen anyone doing this deal relapse. Never. And it's always important. What is my success rate before coming to 12 step? 0. I have a 0% success rate. I am 0% successful at permanent contented sobriety. I got 0. So that's better than what I got. So when a few men in the city have found themselves and have discovered, I want to emphasize this, the joy of helping others to face life again. It really is a joy. But it's like everything else in 12-step, in AA, and CA, and DAA, and whatever brings you to this study. It's experiential. You know what it's like before you start working with your first sponsee. Man, this is going to suck. Oh, I don't want to do it. I'm going to make it worse. Oh, I'm not going to know all the answers. And then we do it. And it's a joy. It's a joy. The joy of helping others to face life again. Offering these as a way of life. These steps out of this book, man, there is joy in it. And it says, and there'll be no stopping until everyone in that town has had the opportunity to recover, if he can and will. Again, I can't, listen, I have done a lot Al-Anon work, so I cannot beat willingness into them. I would have tried, but my job is to just offer this way of life for those that want it, and to be a powerful demonstration of what this way of life has to offer. So it says, still you may say, again, the book meeting us where we're at, meeting us in our doubt, meeting us in our uncertainty, meeting us in our fear. Still you may say, but I will not have the benefit of contact with you who write this book. And I love this answer. We cannot be sure. We cannot be sure. There's that great spiritual story of there's this ancient village, and in this ancient village there was a man, and what had happened is, if you think back to like feudal times where people don't have a lot of money and a lot of resources, and one single farm animal could make or break. And what happened is his horse ran away. And people were like, oh, no, this is such bad news. Some of you guys know the story. Oh, no, this is such bad news. And he says, maybe yes, maybe no. We cannot, and he didn't say we cannot be sure, but I'm going to say we cannot be sure. And then that horse comes back and brings with it a whole herd of wild horses. Overnight, as it were, he's a millionaire. And people are like, amazing, this is such great news. And the man says, we cannot be sure. Maybe yes, maybe no. We cannot be sure. And what happens is his son, his only son, is training the horses, breaking the horses so that they can use them. And he falls off the horse and breaks his leg. And they're like, oh, the members of the village are like, oh no, he's broken. He can't help you with the harvest. This is such bad news. And he says, we cannot be sure. We cannot be sure. And what happens is the country they're a part of goes to war. And the military is coming in and recruiting all able-bodied young men, but can't take, and to a certain death, but can't take his son. We cannot be sure, and it's a, man, if we look at your life, my life, man, like, I don't know what's best for my life. Now, keep in mind, it's fairly certain that the people who wrote this book, we probably won't be in physical contact with because they've since passed on. But that idea, I know, Scott's like, oh, ghosts. Man, there's a whole other tangent about when Bill Wilson was like exploring spirituality and getting into seances and stuff, but I will focus. But it says God will determine that. And this is what I love. God will determine. God is in the outcome business. I'm not in the outcome business. So you must remember that your real reliance is always upon Him. That is where my reliance needs to be, on God. He will show you how to create the fellowship you crave, man. And that has been my experience. You know, like I was going to talk about it more at the end, but I can't tell you what it means to me to be able to do a big book study, like to facilitate a big book study. When I first came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't speak for 6 months. Like, I wouldn't even say on page I'm an alcoholic, because that was a little too much, you know? And like, there are times where I couldn't, oh no, it couldn't have been me, or people didn't think it could have been me to be able to do something like this. And like, it is such a joy for me, like, honestly, like, really, you guys are the real like stars, because like, it is the coolest thing for me to be able to do this. And it's like such an example of how God has created the fellowship that I crave. You know, just the willingness to go help others, the willingness to say yes to service. Rob might be like, could you say no to some? It's a little much. We're worried about you. You know, but the willingness, and I get to do these things that are beyond my wildest dreams, to do things that, oh no, I could never do that. You know what I mean? And I want to emphasize I'm not special. And I'm not meaning that in a self-deprecating way. I mean, I'm just a drunk. I'm just an addict, just like everyone else here. And if God has created a fellowship that I crave in my life, not being any special, not having any more skills or any, you know what I mean? That's what God can do for all of us. You know, that's what's available. And that is the coolest thing. If I, oh, Rob, he said to us, you were special. Oh, that is delightful. Um, so yeah, if it can happen for me, it gets to happen for all of us. And it happens with heart and mind attuned to God and the welfare of others, you know, giving, finding this solution and giving it to others, you know. So it goes on, and some of you guys are like, hey, we know this. We know this. They read this at the end of a lot of meetings. But what happens is when we read something again and again and again, it often sounds like Charlie Brown's teachers on the Peanuts, you know, roar, roar, roar. Yeah, some of you guys know. It's like, it means nothing. It's like, and for the smokers, it's like, oh, I got to smoke soon. You know what I mean? Like, we're not listening. We want our nicotine fix. There's no judgment, by the way. God separated me. I'm not like an ex-smoker. Like, God intervened where I could not do it for myself. So no judgment, but I get you. I get you. All right. So it says our book is meant to be suggestive only, because we know we're dealing with people. We are dealing with people who are like, do not tell me what to do. You know, you tell me what to do, I guarantee I'm going to do the opposite. I had that person that said, it was right after I got sick. Or maybe a year after I got sick, and I'm, you know, in a wheelchair, and I am consumed with the pain and the suffering and the misery and the self-pity and the self-hatred. And he said, you know, Paige, you have to, he said, but Paige, I'm emotionally, he didn't use this word, I'll say handicapped, because he used a different word. I'm emotionally handicapped. And I'm like, oh, I mean, one of us can go for a walk. But he really was suffering. And he said, Paige, you have to write a gratitude list. And so the spiritual giant that I was, you know, I got a little offended with what he said, took a little offense. You don't know me. You don't know my pain. Look at you. And you tell me I have to do something. I did not write a gratitude list for years. That'll show him I was miserable. I mean, a gratitude list wasn't the make or break. There was a lot of other spiritual actions, but there's no reason not to do one. You know what I mean? Like, so when it says our book is meant to be suggestive only, that's true. But I will point out, we don't have alternative suggestions. We do have this as a way that has worked, and it works. Like, that's the thing. We got something that works. And it says, we realize that we know only a little. God is constantly disclosing more to you and to us. Because again, where is my real reliance? It's on God. This is a way of life. I'm building that. And the humility to say I'm not the final authority. And keep in mind, a lot of times my sponsors will give me a call. And I'm sure it's very frustrating because I don't always have like a definitive do that or don't do that. Sometimes it's a little obvious. But oftentimes it's, why don't we inventory it? Why don't we take it to God? You know what I mean? Like it's not because I am not the final authority. My job is to get you the sponsees I'm working with, the people I'm working with, take their hand and put it in God's hands. Because before the Big Book study, there is no worse hands for my life to be in than mine. My life, listen, actively a dumpster fire, actively, not safe, dumpsters on fire, So it says, ask him. And any time in this book, it says ask. That's a prayer. Y'all know that there was a prayer at the last two paragraphs of, how it works. Or I've said how it works because there's that sneaky prayer and how it works. In a vision for you. And it says, ask him in your morning meditation. Yeah, I don't need to solve the problem for him. I need to get them to the problem solver, God, Ask him in your morning meditation. What that means is that I have a morning meditation practice, that is a part of this thing, that I do it. It's not optional. And if you are like, man, I haven't been doing that, of course, it's hard. It's not easy. Start small, but do it daily. And it'll flow and it'll come. A beautiful thing, so asking God in your morning meditation what you can do each day for the man who is still sick. God, what can I do each day for the person who is still sick? Asking that, what can I do today for those who are suffering? And it says the answers will come. The answers will come. There's a promise. But like all of our promises, it's contingent on some things. If your own house is in order. On Thursday, I was talking about, I'm referencing it because it just happened and it was so much fun for me. But we were talking about two-way prayer. And in the Oxford group, man, if they would come to this place of two-way prayer, and in some of their literature, it's like, man, if you just keep thinking, if you're blocked from God, you know what the answer you're going to be is? Make that amends. Write that inventory. You're just going to be ruminating on the action you need to take. So what do I need to do to get these directions? I need to make sure my channel is clear. I need to clear away the stuff that's blocking me from this power. So the answers will come if your own house is in order. That house cleaning metaphor that I have, the hoarder's house, and I got to clear it away in step 4. But I got to continue to keep it clean in step 10 and in step 11. I got to keep that house clean. And when I do, I get to know that power more. So, and it says, but obviously you cannot transmit something you haven't got. One of the most baffling things was like, yeah, you got to give it away to keep it. When I was new, I'm like, I don't know what that means. Like you have your cake and eat it too, but I want the cake to eat the cake. I don't know what that means. It didn't make any sense. But it only makes sense in an experiential way. When I've begun to awaken spiritually, I know that I've got to keep this by giving it to others. I know that in an experiential way. For me to awaken and to stay awake, see, it's not waking up, it's staying awake. For me to stay awake, I've got to work with others. And so I've got to transmit, to give. I got to make sure I have it. And what is it? The spiritual awakening. And man, I can't stay well on one. I couldn't stay well on one drink. I couldn't stay well on one crack. I couldn't stay well on one pill that I may or may not have found on the floor. Could not stay well on one. I needed more. It's like that for me with the spiritual journey. I can't stay well with one spiritual awakening, one spiritual experience. I need more. So if you're like, man, I've only had the educational variety, great, keep seeking. Let's dive in. There was a newcomer, I was at a meeting, and his sponsor was like, yeah, just make one amends and then I have the rest of your life. And I was like, maybe just dive in a little faster. I didn't open up a 6-pack and just was like, I got the rest of my life for the 6-pack. You know what I mean? I'm after the effect. And if I want the effect from alcohol, I gotta chug it. If I want the effect from this, I gotta dive in. Work this thing hard. I get, so what is that? 5 inappropriate metaphors? What are we, who's counting? Who's gonna hold me to this? Ooh. Come back next week where it'll be a brand new study about the same old page. Ooh. So it says, see to it that your relationship with him is right. And that's what I'm doing. I am building a relationship with him is right, and great events will come to pass. And if you're new, it's like, how do I build a relationship? Well, obviously it's prayer, obviously it's meditation, but that is the purpose of the 12 steps. The purpose of the 12 steps is to build this relationship with this power. So if I'm at step 2 or I'm at step 1 or I've not taken any action, and it's like I don't have this power. Of course not. I could not access this power until I took the actions of the steps. That is the purpose. So that's what I've got to do. I got to see that my relationship with him is right. That relationship with this power is right. And like for those of you that are married, you guys know, or in any sort of like long-term relationship, you're supposed to probably talk to each other every day. It can be a little iffy sometimes. You get some rough patches, but we got to listen. Now this is mind blowing for some people. Listen to their partner. Spend time in union, in communion, spend time together, do things together. You know, if you got like that unspoken argument that's hanging, I know nobody here would ever have that in your relationships, but that unspoken argument where neither of you want to touch it, but you're still like really angry about it, you're not going to feel connected. I've got to do this on a daily basis. It's a relationship. And it really grows and blossoms into a relationship, not with time, but with consistency. That's what makes it. And actually, I was listening to some. I can't remember what spiritual thing I was listening to, but there was a line that said the foundation of love is trust, and that is so true. But how do I get trust? Consistency and integrity. Consistency and integrity builds trust, which awakens to love, and that's how I get there. And it's like that with the spiritual journey. I gotta have consistency with doing this, integrity, I'm actually doing that, and it'll get me there. And I will awaken to a love that is deeper than anything that I've known. I will awaken to a love beyond myself, beyond what this little crackhead could imagine. So see to it that your relationship with him is right, and great events will come to pass for you and countless others. That is a promise. This is the capital G, capital F, great fact. That if I seek to this relationship with a power beyond myself, and I seek to go out and help others, man, everything else is taken care of. I don't got to worry about it. I really don't. And even when I worried about it, all my plans and designs didn't get me there anyways. You know what I mean? Didn't work out. Ever have anything that you actually worried about come into fruition the exact way you thought it would and you're worrying? No, it's always slightly different. So this is the great fact, capital G, capital F. And I love that. God as a great fact, not a little theory, not a meh, okay idea, but a great fact. And I've got to experience that fact. So it says, abandon yourself to God as you understand God. And that's what the third step, and that's the third step, right? That third step decision to abandon, that's what we talk about. We ask his protection and care with complete abandon. It's that leap of faith into these directions. So that is the third step, and following up my third step with action. And it says, as you understand God. Now I got a 1930s. We're going to go a little over because there's no way I'm going to leave the last paragraph for next week. You know what I mean? We're going to go a little over. Thank you for your patience with me. I love how the last one of this study, of course I go over. I've been so good at being on time and like doing it on time. And it's like, man, selfish and self-centered. That's me. I've got a 1930s dictionary because I'm fun. And in my 1930s dictionary, we looked up the word understand. And to understand is to know through experience. So I am abandoning that leap of faith to a God that at the third step, I'm not going to really know, but that I am going to come to know through experience. That's what we're talking about. This whole thing is experiential. So it says, admit your faults to him and to your fellows. Well, that abandonment begins in step 4, and that admission of my faults to him and my fellows. Doesn't that sound like step 5? Right? Step 5. Y'all know that there were some steps in here. We're talking about steps. Clear away the wreckage of your past. That sounds like a nice step to me. Going out, making amends, making it right, restoring. And it says, give freely of what you find. So that's what I'm here to do. What did I find? An awakened spirit. Give freely. These 12 steps, right? The 4th dimension, give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit. Capital F, capital S, fellowship of the Spirit. And keep in mind, the only bar to entry is to any 12-step fellowship is a problem with whatever the focus of the fellowship is, and a desire. You don't even have no bar to entry. But the fellowship of the Spirit, there's some actions I got to take. There's not really you know what I mean? The fellowship of the Spirit, all that is asked of me is to work these 12 steps as a way of life. Now, last year when we did this, Scott put in the chat, it is wild the things I remember and the things I don't. Scott put in the chat that he has this view. I know you're like getting nervous. What did I put in the chat? I've made some jokes. Is this going to be the 6th inappropriate thing, but Paige isn't going to take responsibility? No, it's on me. Scott put in the chat that idea of the fellowship of the Spirit is also that idea of I have fellowship with you, and the fellowship of the Spirit is that relationship with God, which is another beautiful way to look at that. Isn't it wild what my brain remembers with the little ADHD that I don't have? Ooh, a squirrel. I was feeding the squirrels today. That's what I was up to in between working with others. So, fellowship of the Spirit. And you will surely meet some of us as you trudge. The trudge is that walk with purpose. We have been given a way of life with purpose. Trudge the capital R, capital H, capital D, road of happy destiny. Not the vacation destination, you know what I mean? Not the Cabo of happy destiny or the Ibiza of happy destiny, you know what I'm saying? The Canary Islands of happy destiny or the Bahamas. No, it is a road, it is a path, it is a way of life, and that we get to walk this thing shoulder to shoulder. And it says, may God bless you and keep you until then. The beautiful way. That's what these steps are, to get me and to put me in God's hands. And I want to thank you guys so much. I really, really mean it. It's such a privilege to do. It is just really the highlight of, not genuinely the highlight of my life. It's such a privilege to be of service in this way. And yeah, we'll be kicking off from the very beginning next week. So thank you guys so much. I'll stop the recording and we'll wrap up with a prayer.